I never thought I'd be writing this. Even as I type these words, it feels surreal, like I'm living in someone else's nightmare. But this is real. Every excruciating detail. And yeah, I had sex with my wife's sister. Not proud of it, but here we are. Let me start by saying that I'm not some unhinged maniac. I've got a pretty successful career, and most people would probably describe me as a calm guy. The kind of person who doesn't lose his temper easily. But jealousy? That's always been my weak spot, lurking beneath the surface, ready to bubble over when things didn't sit right with me. And man, if only I had trusted that instinct sooner, I might not be in this hellhole of a situation. So, let me tell you about her. My wife, the woman who could make any guy lose his mind. From the moment we met, she was like a magnet. Her looks? Perfect. The kind of face you double tap on Instagram without a second thought. But it wasn't just that. She had this way about her, this confidence, a fire in her that made me want to chase her, even when I should have probably run the other way. She was headstrong, too, like she always had to be in control of everything. At first, I thought it was sexy. Hell, a challenge is always intriguing, right? But after years of dealing with her stubbornness, that charm wore off real fast. We met at a friend's party, one of those nights where you don't expect much to happen. And then bam, she walks in and owns the room. I couldn't take my eyes off her. We hit it off immediately. And before long, we were inseparable. Fast forward a few years, and we were married. That's when things started to shift. It wasn't bad at first, but there were red flags. Little things that added up. I just wasn't paying attention. Her career had always been kind of shaky. She'd jump from one thing to the next, never really finding her groove. At first, she was working in marketing, some mid-level position at a company that didn't seem to care much about her. Then one day, she came home and just quit. Said she was tired of working for people who didn't appreciate her. And you know what? I backed her up. I told her to take her time and find something that made her happy. Turns out that something was Instagram. She had this account, mostly just casual stuff. Photos of her, trips we took, outfits, the usual vanity parade. It wasn't anything serious back then, but when she quit her job, she threw herself into it. She started posting more, following every social media trend, sharing every moment of our lives online. At first, I thought it was harmless. I mean, how bad could it be? It kept her busy while she looked for another job, and it wasn't like we were struggling for money or anything. I didn't expect it to blow up like it did. I figured she'd mess around with it for a while, get bored, and move on. But then her follower count started climbing. At first, it was just a few hundred, then thousands, and before I knew it, she had tens of thousands of people hanging on to every selfie, every outfit shot, every dumb product she promoted. People started recognizing her when we were out, like she was some kind of celebrity. I should have seen the danger then. But no, I was stupid. I actually encouraged her to go all in on it. I figured, why not? It's something she's good at. And if it makes her happy, that's all that matters, right? And if it didn't work out, well, we had enough savings to fall back on. What I didn't realize was that this stupid, shallow online world would become more important to her than anything else, including me. At first, I was proud of her. She was making a name for herself, getting sponsorships, brands were sending her free stuff, and she even started getting paid for posts. I didn't really get it, but I was happy she'd found something she loved. But the more time she spent on her phone, glued to the screen, the more distant she became. Every conversation seemed to revolve around her followers, her posts, her brand. And don't even get me started on the constant selfies. God, it was like living with a damn Kardashian wannabe. We started to drift apart. Sex became less frequent. She'd brush me off, claiming she was tired or had to get up early for a collab meeting. At first, I bought it, thinking maybe it was just a phase, that she'd snap out of it and things would go back to normal. But they never did. And now, looking back, I realize how blind I was. I was so focused on supporting her, on being the good husband, that I didn't notice the shift happening right in front of my eyes. She wasn't just building her Instagram career. She was building a life that didn't include me. So yeah, that's the setup. I'll get to the part about her sister soon enough. Because let me tell you, shit only gets messier from here. Up until a certain point, things weren't going all that well with her Instagram page. It was just one of those typical vanity projects, posts about our vacations, her shopping trips, selfies with that look at me vibe. Sure, she had a decent following, but nothing that could pay the bills, if you know what I mean. Then, out of nowhere, things started to change. And fast. She started meeting new people, influencers and bloggers, the kind of crowd that lived their lives through a camera lens. She would go out for networking events, which I later realized was just a fancy way of saying, I'm hanging out with other attention seekers. I didn't think much of it at first. She claimed they didn't promote her page or anything, that it was just her learning the ins and outs of how the algorithms worked. Honestly, I didn't know how much of that was true, but the growth was undeniable. Her followers were increasing rapidly, like someone flipped a switch. I didn't question it. Maybe I should have, but I was just happy for her. Happy that she was finally doing something she felt passionate about. I guess, in a way, I wanted her to succeed because if she was happy, then maybe things would be better between us. But looking back, man, I was blind. I should have noticed all the signs, especially since things between us were only getting worse. Now, her family? That's a whole different story. Her parents are what you'd call old school. Conservative, religious, the kind of people who go to church every Sunday and look down on anything they see as worldly. They didn't like the idea of their daughter being all over social media, showing herself off to strangers, but she didn't care. She never cared what anyone thought, especially them. Her sister, though? She was nothing like my wife. Calm, quiet, more like me in a lot of ways. If my wife was a firecracker, her sister was more like a candle, steady, constant, and not one to make waves. She wasn't into the whole Instagram thing or the wild lifestyle that my wife was starting to get into. Sometimes I'd wonder how they were even related. They were polar opposites. The first red flags, though, they came when she started posting these swimsuit photos. Now, I get it. People post stuff like that from vacations, at the beach, whatever. But this wasn't that. She started going out of her way to take these professional photo shoots, all dolled up, looking like she was auditioning for some Sports Illustrated cover or something. It wasn't just casual fun, it was deliberate. And it made me uncomfortable, but I didn't say much. After all, it's her body, her page. I thought it was harmless, at least at first, but then things started getting weird. I started noticing expensive things showing up around the house. I'm not talking about little things. I mean new furniture, fancy decor, clothes, bags, the kind of stuff I knew I hadn't given her money for. At first, I thought maybe she was using our savings or some extra money from her blog. But when I asked her about it, she just shrugged it off, saying it was all from her influencer work. Now, I'm not dumb. I know how these things work, and I know she wasn't getting that many brand deals or sponsorships. So where was all this money coming from? I decided to do a little digging of my own. I checked her Instagram, went through all her posts, looked for ads, sponsored posts, anything that would explain this sudden influx of cash. And guess what? I didn't find a damn thing. No ads, no partnerships, no nothing. That's when I realized something was off. Really off. I had more questions than answers, and the worst part was I had no idea how to even bring it up without her flipping out on me. I couldn't figure it out on my own. No matter how much I tried to piece it together, the puzzle didn't make sense. Where was the money coming from? What was really going on behind the scenes? I didn't know who to trust or how to confront her without her turning everything back on me. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I hired a private detective. Now, I always thought detective work was some Hollywood movie crap. I imagined these guys working out of shady offices, tailing people in beat-up cars, and charging peanuts. Let me tell you, that's not how it works. Turns out it's expensive. Really expensive. But at that point, I didn't care. I needed answers, and if it cost a little extra, so be it. I had to know what was going on with my wife, where the money was coming from, and whether there was something darker lurking beneath her sudden Instagram success. I remember feeling uneasy about it, like maybe I was crossing a line. But then again, if she wasn't hiding anything, I had nothing to worry about, right? At least, that's how I justified it to myself. The detective was professional, didn't ask too many questions, just got straight to business. He promised to dig into her activities, see if there were any meetings or transactions that didn't add up. In the meantime, I thought about someone else I could turn to for help, her sister. Now, I hadn't confided in her before, but given how calm and level-headed she always was, I figured she might know something or at least give me some advice. So, I went to see her one evening. I didn't want to make it obvious, so I acted like it was just a casual visit, brother-in-law dropping by for a chat. When I got there, it was just her. The house was quiet, and she seemed genuinely surprised to see me. We ended up sitting in her living room, sharing a bottle of wine. She had this way of calming the air around her, making you feel like everything was going to be okay, even when it clearly wasn't. We didn't get into the heavy stuff right away, just small talk at first. But eventually I had to bring it up. I told her how worried I was, that my wife was acting strange, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I tried to keep my voice steady, but she could tell I was freaking out. I was scared my wife might have gotten involved with the wrong crowd, that she was hiding something dangerous. Maybe it was paranoia, but after everything that had been happening, I couldn't rule anything out. Her sister listened quietly, her face serious, but not shocked. When I asked her if she knew anything at all, she shook her head. She said she hadn't noticed anything unusual and that my wife never talked about any of her personal struggles. But then again, they weren't exactly close anymore, not like when they were younger. Still, she promised me that if she ever picked up on something, she'd let me know right away. It was a frustrating conversation because I left with no more answers than I came in with. But at least I felt like I had someone on my side. Her sister was like that, calm, rational, someone you could count on when things got out of hand. But even with her assurance, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something big, something terrible, waiting for me just around the corner. When the detective finally called me back to meet, I wasn't sure what to expect. There was a pit in my stomach the entire drive to his office. This nagging feeling that whatever he'd uncovered wasn't going to be good. And when I walked in and saw his face, serious, no small talk, straight to business, I knew I was right. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He sat me down, pulled out a folder, and laid it all out. "Your wife's Instagram? That's just the tip of the iceberg," he said. My stomach dropped, but I didn't interrupt. I wanted to know everything. "It's a front," he continued. "A platform to promote her main source of income. You've probably heard of it." And when he said the name of the site, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I'm not going to say the name here. It's one of those notorious websites where women post photos and videos that leave little to the imagination. You know the type. Hot, provocative, and very lucrative if you're playing the game right. I just sat there, staring at him, not fully processing what he was saying. My wife? My wife was posting on that site? The woman who told me she was working hard to grow her Instagram and become a legitimate influencer was actually making money from a site like that? The detective didn't stop there. He pulled out the receipts, so to speak. Screenshots of her account on this site, payments linked directly to her bank account, schedules of her photo shoots, everything. And these weren't your typical Instagram pics. No, these were professional, steamy, and way more revealing than anything she'd ever posted on her public account. Stuff I never imagined her being okay with, let alone selling to strangers online. I flipped through the papers slowly, my heart pounding. The detective sat back, letting me take it all in, not saying a word. The more I looked, the more the reality hit me. She had built this entire second life, this secret career, without me having the slightest clue. Sure, she told me she was doing photo shoots and working hard on her content, but I thought it was all for Instagram, just part of the influencer grind. But no, this wasn't about fashion posts or sponsored travel pics. This was about cashing in on men paying for exclusive, provocative photos. I remember looking at the transaction history, thousands of dollars rolling into her account, all from this site. That explained the expensive furniture, the designer clothes, the random luxury items that kept showing up at the house. It wasn't Instagram deals or brand sponsorships. It was this. I didn't know what to feel. Anger? Betrayal? Confusion? They all hit me at once. Some guys, I guess, might have shrugged it off, maybe even seen it as no big deal. I know there are people who are totally fine with their partners doing stuff like this, as long as there's no physical cheating involved. But that's not me. To me, this was a betrayal. Maybe not in the traditional sense, but betrayal nonetheless. The secrecy, the lies, the fact that she was selling herself online without even a conversation about it. I wasn't just her husband anymore. I was the fool in the background, the one kept in the dark while she put herself on display for God knows how many men to gawk at. The detective leaned forward then, snapping me out of my thoughts. "I'm sorry," he said, not like it was his fault, but just because he knew how much this sucked. "I know this isn't easy to hear." I nodded, still numb. I should have seen it. I muttered, almost to myself. All those times she went to photo shoots, all those nights she came home with new clothes or bags or whatever, saying it was part of the job. I never thought it was this. "We all miss things," the detective replied, trying to offer some comfort. "Sometimes people are good at hiding who they really are." I couldn't shake the thoughts spinning in my head. Why didn't we talk about this? Why didn't she come to me and at least try to explain what she was doing? Maybe she thought I'd lose it. Maybe she was scared of what I'd say, but still something. I kept thinking that if we just talked, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Maybe she wouldn't have felt the need to hide it. Or maybe we would have split up earlier, and I wouldn't be here, sitting in some PI's office, feeling like my world was crumbling. I thought back to all those times I noticed little changes. The more revealing photos, the new clothes, the frequent shoots that started happening more and more. Every single one of them, now that I knew the truth, was designed for this other site. Those weren't just innocent Instagram shots. They were for paying customers. I took the folder from the detective, barely able to look at the contents. There were photos, records of transactions, messages between her and people I didn't know, men paying for private content. Everything was there. All the proof I needed. The truth was staring me right in the face, and I didn't know how the hell to handle it. I left the office that day with more answers than I wanted, but at least now I knew what I was up against. What she'd been doing. What kind of person she'd become. And I still didn't have the faintest clue what to do next. After leaving the detective's office with that folder full of evidence, I wasn't sure what to do. My head was spinning, and I felt sick to my stomach. There was no way I could confront her yet. Not with all this mess jumbling around in my brain. I needed to talk to someone who might actually understand. Someone who knew her, but wasn't caught up in all the lies. And honestly, the only person I could think of was her sister. So, I drove to her place. I didn't call ahead or anything. I just showed up at her door, not knowing what I was going to say or how she'd react. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, I think she could tell something was wrong. She had that concerned look on her face, like she was bracing for bad news. "Come in," she said, her voice soft. I stepped inside, feeling the weight of the folder in my hands, knowing what was about to happen. We sat down in her living room, just like we had a few nights ago when I first came to her for advice, but this time I wasn't there for casual conversation. I was there to unload a bombshell. I couldn't hold back. I told her everything. I laid it all out, the detective, the website, the photos, the money. At first, she just sat there, frozen, like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Then her expression shifted, from shock to something I couldn't quite place. Disgust, maybe, or confusion. I pulled out the folder and showed her some of the evidence. The photos, the transactions, the schedule. She stared at them for a long moment before pushing them away. I had no idea, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't believe she's doing this. I don't know what to do," I admitted, feeling the weight of everything I'd been carrying for the past few days. I couldn't think straight, couldn't figure out what the next step should be. I didn't see it coming at all. She stood up and walked to the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of wine from the counter. "Here," she said, pouring us both a glass. "You need this." I took it, grateful for anything that might take the edge off. She sat back down, but I could tell she was trying to change the subject. She didn't want to dwell on the mess her sister had made. so she asked about work, about anything but the thing that was tearing my life apart. And honestly, I was thankful for the distraction. For a few minutes, it felt like things were normal, like I wasn't living in this nightmare. But, of course, it was just a temporary reprieve. No amount of small talk or wine was going to erase what was happening. Still, I appreciated her support. She didn't judge me, didn't make me feel like an idiot for not seeing the signs sooner. She was just there, and that meant more than I could express. When I finally got up to leave, I felt a strange sense of calm, like I wasn't so alone in this anymore. As I was saying goodbye, I went in for a hug, something normal, something friendly. It was supposed to be just that, a simple gesture of thanks, of comfort. But when she hugged me back, it wasn't just friendly. She hugged me so tightly, her arms wrapped around me like she didn't want to let go. And I'm not going to lie, there was something about it that made me feel warm, made me feel good. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't completely falling apart. It was comforting, but not in the way a hug from family usually is. It lingered longer than it should have. Friendly hugs don't last that long, do they? At the time, I convinced myself it was just two people, both caught up in a terrible situation, offering each other support. But the way her body pressed against mine, the way her breath slowed against my shoulder, it was different. I didn't know what to make of it at the moment. Maybe I didn't want to. But one thing was clear. That hug was the beginning of something I wasn't ready to admit. 2 days later, the dinner I had been dreading was finally upon us. It had been planned for a while, a family gathering at our place with her parents, her sister, and of course my wife. The last thing I wanted to do was sit around the table pretending like everything was fine, but I decided to hold off on revealing what I knew until then. I figured if I was going to blow everything up, I might as well do it with a bang. That morning, I still wasn't sure how I was going to handle it. Part of me wanted to pull her aside, confront her privately, and get it over with. But then I thought, no, why make it easy for her? She had been hiding things from me for months, if not longer, and her family, especially her conservative, religious parents, deserved to know exactly who their daughter had become. The atmosphere at dinner was tense, at least for me. Everyone else was chatting away, making small talk, but I could barely sit still. Her parents were as usual. Her dad making polite conversation about work, her mom asking about our lives like we were the perfect married couple. And my wife, she acted like nothing was wrong, smiling, laughing, carrying on as if our whole world wasn't about to collapse. About halfway through dinner, after her sister had made a comment about how proud she was of my wife's successful career, I decided it was time. I cleared my throat and looked around the table, feeling the weight of the moment pressed down on me. I started keeping my tone as casual as I could. It's amazing how well she's done for herself lately. Really impressive. I glanced at my wife, whose smile froze just a little, sensing that something was off. In fact, I continued, her career has taken quite the unexpected turn. Her parents looked at me curiously, still clueless, while her sister gave me a cautious look, probably remembering our conversation from the other day. I mean, the way she's managed to balance her life as a social media influencer and, well, her other endeavors, I said, letting the words hang in the air just long enough for everyone to start getting uneasy. My wife's face was starting to go pale. And since we're all here tonight, I thought it would be a good time to show you exactly what she's been up to. I pulled out my phone, opened the browser, and navigated to her profile on that site. The one where she'd been posting all those photos, the real source of her income. I turned the screen toward her parents, letting them see the truth for themselves. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Her mom's face went from confused to horrified in a matter of seconds. Her dad's mouth opened, but no words came out. He just stared at the screen like he couldn't comprehend what he was looking at. Then, all hell broke loose. Her mom started shouting, demanding to know how she could do this, what kind of life she had been living behind their backs. Her dad tried to keep calm at first, but his voice quickly escalated, mixing disbelief with fury. My wife, she looked like she was going to faint, stammering out excuses, trying to defend herself, but nothing was landing. She was caught, and there was no talking her way out of this one. Her sister stayed silent, her eyes flicking between me and the chaos at the table, like she didn't know whose side to take. As the yelling escalated, I stood up, calmly taking off my jacket. I didn't feel the need to stick around and listen to the fallout. I had done what I came to do. They could fight it out without me. "I'm gonna head out," I said, my voice cutting through the shouting for just a moment. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner." Without waiting for a response, I grabbed my keys and left the house. The cool evening air hit me as I stepped outside, and I felt a strange sense of relief, even as the echoes of their argument faded behind me. I wasn't angry anymore, just exhausted. I headed to a nearby bar, the one I used to go to with friends before everything got so complicated. I sat down, ordered a drink, and let the noise of the place drown out the chaos from earlier. For the first time in a while, I felt like I could breathe. About 20 minutes into my second drink, just as the burn of the alcohol was starting to take the edge off the chaos I'd unleashed, she walked in. My wife's sister. I didn't expect to see her, and yet, when she slid onto the stool next to me, it felt strangely natural, like this was exactly where she was supposed to be. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat down quietly, glanced at me, then waved over the bartender. "I'll have what he's having," she said, her voice steady but soft. I looked at her, our eyes meeting for a moment longer than usual. There was something there, something unspoken that neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. A shared understanding of the mess we were in, the fallout that was coming. We started with small talk, as if avoiding the elephant in the room would somehow make everything easier. She asked me how work was going, how I was handling everything, but there was this undercurrent in her voice, like she knew we were skirting around the inevitable. I answered her questions, but my mind wasn't really on the conversation. I kept looking at her, noticing how different she was from her sister. Calm, composed, grounded, everything my wife wasn't. As we sat there, drink after drink, it became clear that this wasn't just some casual chat between in-laws. There was something deeper happening, something I hadn't anticipated but couldn't deny. I started to relax, feeling more comfortable with her than I had with anyone in a long time. The tension I had been carrying around, the stress of the marriage, the lies, all of it seemed to slip away the longer we talked. And then, at some point in the night, she reached over and gently took my hand. Her touch was soft, but there was an intention behind it that sent a jolt through me. "Do you want to go for a walk?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. I hesitated for a split second, but I knew my answer before the words even left my mouth. "Yeah, let's go." We stepped out into the cool night air, and the city felt quieter than usual. We walked side by side, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt at ease. We didn't talk much at first, just walked in silence, letting the calmness of the night settle around us. But as the minutes passed, we started to open up. She told me about how hard it had been watching her sister and me fall apart, how she had noticed the distance between us long before I had. She wasn't judgmental, just honest, and I appreciated that more than I could say. As we kept walking, I realized how different I felt around her. I wasn't tense, wasn't on edge, wasn't waiting for the next fight or the next excuse. I felt alive, younger, somehow like the weight of everything I'd been carrying had been lifted. I hadn't felt this way in years, not with my wife, not with anyone. Before I knew it, we were at her place. It was as if the walk had flown by, and suddenly we were standing at her door. "You want to come inside?" she asked, her voice soft but inviting. I didn't hesitate. I didn't even need to think about it. "Yeah," I said, following her through the door. Inside, it was quiet, peaceful. The kind of peace I hadn't felt in my own home for what seemed like forever. She opened a bottle of wine, something she'd been saving for a special occasion, and we sat down on her couch, talking about everything and nothing. The tension that had been building between us all night was still there, but now it was tangible, humming in the air. At some point, I don't even remember when the conversation stopped. We just looked at each other, and without saying a word, we kissed. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't subtle. It was electric, the kind of kiss that makes you forget about everything else around you. And in that moment, it felt like everything was right in the world. The night that followed was intense. It wasn't just about the physical connection, though that was definitely there, but it was something more. It was like all the emotions I'd been bottling up, all the frustration and loneliness, finally found an outlet. She made me feel things I hadn't felt in a long time, and I didn't want it to end. I spent the night at her place, and when I woke up the next morning, I didn't regret it. Not for a second. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about getting back at my wife for everything she had done. It was about starting something new, something real. And in that moment, I realized I didn't owe my wife anything anymore. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. When I finally got home, my wife was waiting for me, standing in the doorway, like she had been waiting all night. The second I walked through the door, she slapped me hard across the face. It stung, but it didn't hurt nearly as much as everything that had led to this moment. "You're a fool," she spat at me, her eyes blazing with anger. "You think I didn't know where you were? You think I care? I'm filing for divorce." I didn't even react. In fact, I was relieved. She had saved me the trouble of having to bring it up myself. "Good," I said, my voice calm. "That's probably the smartest thing you've said in a while." The divorce was quick, mercifully quick. No drawn-out battles. No back and forth over who got what. We both knew it was over, and neither of us had any fight left to drag it out. 2 months later, her sister and I decided to come clean to her parents. We thought they'd be angry, judgmental, maybe even disgusted. But surprisingly, they were supportive, happy for us even. Maybe they saw something in us that I hadn't been willing to admit at first, that this was the best thing for everyone involved. My ex-wife's parents, as conservative as they were somehow able to look past the mess and see that we were building something good out of the wreckage. As for my ex-wife, she threw herself into her social media world with more energy than ever before. Without me around to judge or offer my opinions, she was free to be whoever she wanted to be. And honestly, she thrived. Her follower count exploded, her content got more attention, and she seemed to be living her best life. She was no longer tied down by the expectations of being someone's wife. And me? I was fine with that. I didn't care anymore. I had moved on to something real, something that made me feel alive again. And I didn't look back. Update: it's been 2.5 years since everything went down, and I figured it was time to give an update. A lot has changed, and honestly, life has taken a turn I never would have expected back when all that chaos started. First off, we got married. My wife's sister, well, ex-wife's sister, but that feels weird to say now, and I tied the knot about a year ago. It wasn't a big wedding, nothing extravagant, just something simple with close family and friends. And honestly, that's exactly what I wanted. After all the drama from before, a quiet celebration felt right. And the even bigger news? We're expecting. Yep, we got a baby on the way. I still can't believe it sometimes. It's funny how life works out. If you'd told me back then that I'd be starting a family with her, I would have thought you were crazy. But here we are, getting ready for the next big chapter of our lives. And I couldn't be happier. As for how things have been, well, they've been good. No, not just good, really good. We've built a life that's stable, drama-free, and honestly, just peaceful. I finally feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. No more lies, no more hiding things. Just the two of us, working through life's ups and downs together. And that's all I ever really wanted. My ex? From what I hear, she's still doing well with her social media thing. She's living her life, and as far as I know, she's happy. We don't talk, and I don't see a need to. I moved on, she moved on, and that's that. I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who's followed along with my story. It's been a wild ride, but I'm grateful for where it's brought me. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that life has a funny way of working itself out, even when things seem completely broken. So, good luck to everyone out there going through their own messes. Keep pushing forward. You never know where you'll end up. Thanks for the support, and take care.